Hello again, everyone. We made a goldenrod tincture in the last video using Everclear and water and goldenrod flowers. Now we're going to make a goldenrod infusion. It's very similar to the process where you make a goldenrod vinegar, which you use apple cider vinegar. But this uses olive oil and it has plenty of medicinal uses. The infusion is a base of a lot of other healing recipes, some edible recipes, and also in the cold pressed soap making, which is really a neat way to make soap. And it's a little less time consuming. You still have to use lye, but a little less time consuming and problematic for beginners than some of the more advanced soap making methods. So for this, you're going to take 1 cup of goldenrod flowers. I believe that the instructions say dry, and dry is great. But I know plenty of herbalists who use them fresh. And they are so thin, they dry so quickly. You just don't want them to mold in your mixture. And that's why you don't want to have anything that's too damp. Now these have been picked from a nice sunny pasture where they were growing. So they actually had a fairly dry texture. You can see, you can probably hear them crinkle against my hand. And I had them laying in the sun for about 2 or 3 hours. So I wouldn't say they are dried as if I hang herbs or dry to preserve them. But as far as not being moist or damp in any way, that could cause mold or mildew in my infusion here. I'm not worried about that. It doesn't take me very long to dry. If you get a little bit of leaf or bark in there, it's okay. Any part of the goldenrod plant, which is above ground, can be used medicinally or in edible recipes as long as you're not allergic to it. You just don't want to reduce too much the space of the flowers that are in it. They have the most potent healing properties. And I picked a whole lot of goldenrod this morning with the youngest grandkiddos. We were doing forest school lessons. And it was very quickly. You can pluck them up. You want to get a big bit of them. The stalks are hard and they bend but don't want to break. So you take a pair of scissors or knife and you'll go much more quickly. But see, this was probably only about a minute of picking right here to get all of this. That was quite a few flowers in there to get that many of the heads. So they are little. It takes a lot of picking. If you've not done it before, I would suggest picking twice as much as you think you're going to need. Now, as far as goldenrod and hay fever, I personally think, and I believe I said in the article, and I know I did in the other video, that goldenrod gets a bad rap. It does not necessarily cause ragweed and common seasonal allergies with the headache and runny or stuffy nose and stinging or watery eyes. It can, but typically it is ragweed that causes that. And because goldenrod has a much more distinctive and colorful look, that's what people notice growing out in the fields when there's a high pollen count. The ragweed is a lot plainer and it grows in the same areas, and sometimes it'll loop around and use the goldenrod kind of like a trellis. So the causes of hay fever and who the culprit is kind of conflated between the two of them. You can have an allergy to it. I mentioned in the other video on how to make the goldenrod tincture, a researcher did a study and planted a whole field of nothing but goldenrod, plucked it, weeded it, made sure there was no ragweed. And some folks that struggle with seasonal allergies, the vast majority of them still suffered from just breathing in ragweed. So it can depend on how severe your allergy is. If you have a severe allergy to it, sorry, can't talk today, I've been talking nonstop since early this morning. It might cause a dermatitis type rash reaction to your skin merely by handling it. So you want to test a little bit in your skin in a small spot. If you're going to consume it, you want to do it in a very, very small amount. I'm not a medical professional, so I suggest you talk to a doctor or medical professional first before embarking any type of natural healing type of regimen. You always want to make sure you are picking goldenrod or anything else from an area that's been free from chemical sprays or anything like that. It grows regularly along the roadside, but in most communities that's going to mean it has been sprayed with something. And even if your neighboring farmer or homesteader says, sure, you can come over here and forage whenever you want, you got to double check and make sure what they spray. Some folks don't think of certain products as actually being harmful. They've been told that, or they just think that it's sold so it's safe by the government, which doesn't mean it's going to be safe to consume or even use topically. I'm sure we're all aware of what might be Bayer's biggest regret of buying out Monsanto after all the Roundup Ready lawsuits. Maybe not. Maybe they're going to make so much money that'll be fine for them. But we grow all organically here, treat the garden and the weeds that we don't use with natural pesticides and herbicides. So I can pick anywhere on our farm. You need to make sure you know what was grown in, around, or sprayed upon anything you're going to forage. Now this is not quite a cupful. It's pretty close. I could go ahead and throw in some leaves if I wanted to take up some space. You can see these leaves have some damage onto them by bugs. Not Japanese beetles, which we've had such a problem with, but typical garden bugs. So I'm not going to put anything in there with a bug bite, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. You could cut the bug bite out like you would on an apple or a tomato. But I don't need that much more space in here, and I can just go a little tiny bit less olive oil if I needed to. All these measurements are approximates. You want about a cup. So we're going to go ahead and get our goldenrod in here now that we've measured it out. You could also, if you're going to make this frequently, keep one mason jar just for this to save this tedious step of trying to move it all in here without losing a tinky tiny little bit. And get it pressed down. Mark the level on your mason jar. So that's about halfway. You really would like to have it ideally up here. I've got a few more bits and pieces in here. So you could eyeball it and not have to use a measuring cup. And you need about 12 ounces of olive oil. I get mine, it's extra virgin olive oil, and I've used it for just cooking regular meals. We have some good expensive kind, my husband's stockpile. But this is from the Dollar Tree, and other than the plastic bottle, I think it's great. It works just fine. So I'm not going to measure out the 12 ounces, which is approximate, especially because I'm using a little less goldenrod, and you really want to fill it up to the lip. And my dollar's worth of olive oil. You want to press it down. You just need to make sure that all of your goldenrod, I need a spoon here, make sure that all of your goldenrod is fully covered and saturated. That's why filling the jar full helps to make that sure everything's filled to the top and everything's saturated. I do have some smaller mason jars. I could have made this in a jelly jar. But our wild blackberries are just about done for the year, so all my jelly jars are going to be in high command. So now you can see it's fully saturated in there. The extra air in there is not really going to make any difference at all. I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on. These are reusable mason jar lids. I don't use these when I'm doing anything food stuff, either water bath or pressure canning. I like the ring that you can reuse. The lid you only use once. It seems to give a better seal. But for tinctures and infusions and things like that that are only going to have to keep in a nice airtight container for X amount of weeks, it will keep a nice tight seal on it. You can reuse them over and over, so it is a money saver. Now, there's several ways you can do this. Take a look when you're done, make sure everything's still saturated. Everything will settle back down in a minute. I've got a piece or two up top. You can go ahead and follow directions in the article that tells you how many weeks to keep it in a cool, dark place. That's the long method. And the longer that the goldenrod and the oil are infused together, the stronger, more potent it is when you pour it through a fine strainer and strain away the material, the flowers. But you can also do the quicker method. I'm going to go ahead and put this in my makeshift double boiler. I'll turn the camera here a bit. Hopefully not making anybody too dizzy. Now there it is, my makeshift double boiler. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it on low heat to a simmer. I'm going to let that simmer for 2 to 3 hours. I typically would do 3, maybe a little more, but my jar isn't very full. And you just need to watch your pot, make sure it doesn't come to a boil, and also make sure that the water doesn't all evaporate away. If it does, put some more in there. I have a couple inches of water, something I typically do when I'm using it for a double boiler. And you're just going to go ahead and let it stay at that simmer, and then you could use it right away once it cools enough for whatever type of project that you're making this for. But I would recommend letting it sit at room temperature for several days to fully settle and cure before you put it through a strainer. And then you could use it in a healing recipe, or even in a food recipe, aromatherapy, or in soap making. This speeds the process up. You still really should wait several days after you do the simmer and let it settle at room temperature, but you could use it right away. I'm just not going to guarantee it will be as potent as what it was. Oh, my tripod did not cooperate exactly. I apologize. I've got a leg that's starting to bust on it. So if you were tilty there for a minute, I am sorry, but now you can see how it is in the double boiler. Nothing too exciting here. It's going to simmer for 2 to 3 hours, and then I will let it settle at room temperature. I'm going to set it not necessarily in a cool, dark place because it's going to be cooler than room temperature. It's 90-some degrees outside, so it probably wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't be that much of a drastic change. If you're doing this later in the fall or in the early spring or winter, it would make a difference. I'm just going to put it onto the kitchen counter and have it out direct sunlight, and after about 2 or 3 days I'm going to go ahead and strain it away and then store it in smaller bottles so I'm not opening up the big jar and exposing everything to moisture and air and potential debris.